balanced schedule. The Saints last year had the worst record in the National Football League of all 28 teams, a 1-15 record, and yet you look at the schedule, and what do you see? They have to play teams such as Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Minnesota, Houston. Those teams, with the exception of Pittsburgh, were all playoff teams last year, and they have to play Atlanta twice and Los Angeles twice. So where's the balanced schedule? I don't see it.
Well, you have to play Atlanta. They're in that division.
And Los Angeles.
The Rams because they're in that division.
Right.
And it is hard to understand, but you can't hide from anybody. You have to line up and play people, and that's really the deceptive thing about the league. I just don't think it's a good idea to say that you're not as good as so-and-so, so you're going to play a lesser schedule than somebody else. I think you're all in the same league, the National Football League, and I think you should play the teams as they come along. And as you say, it's hard to understand really what the balance system really means.
Well, Seattle and the New York Jets, just to take a couple of examples, aren't on the schedule, and those would certainly be more appropriate opponents if you believe in the balanced schedule than Philadelphia or Cleveland would be.
Yes, that's right. They played the Jets last year, but I guess they did not play Seattle a year ago.
Hank, you've been a coach in both leagues now, the Chiefs in the AFL before the AFC, and then with the Saints in the NFC. Why is the AFC so much more dominant over the NFC when it comes to Super Bowls? Why do they have the better teams in that league?
Well, I think basically it has to start with the organizations. I think the organizations in the American Football Conference have been more consistent, more solid. You'd have to say that about that division, and in conjunction with that, I think they were able to get a lot of young quarterbacks, and that has made a tremendous difference. I think that the quarterback situation now has changed somewhat, and that there's some outstanding young people in the National Football Conference now, too. But overall, you would have to say that, it has to begin with organization, and I think the quarterback situation has made a big difference.
You're looking now at Tampa Bay during the preseason, and that division to me seems to be the one that when I think about, picking who I would pick in that division, that seems to me to be one of the toughest because you've got 5 teams really that aren't that much different and don't have that much. There's not one dominant team and one real weak team in that division.
Well, I think overall, that you can say that almost of all the teams in the National Football League. I think that 1981 will be a year where the competitive balance in the league will be more keen than it's ever been. I don't think there are any great teams in professional football anymore. I think there's some good teams, but I don't think there's any great teams. By that I mean I don't think any one particular team is going to dominate division or dominate the league like some teams in the past have done. And for that reason, I think that the league this year will be very, very competitive. The National Football League has been gearing for parity for an extended period of time, and that's because that's the way the draft is set up. And I think at this particular stage in the history of the National Football League, I think there is more parity, and they have reached parity, and that's why I think it's going to be a very exciting season in 1981.
Our guest is Hank Stram, currently a sports commentator with CBS Sports, both on the radio and television side. The numbers to call here on WHO Saturday Sports Line in the time that we have to talk to Hank, 282-5111 locally, and the toll-free Watts line for the state of Iowa is 1-800-532-1111. Now stay tuned for a sports update from the Associated Press next on WHO Saturday Sports Line.
This week's NASCAR stop is in Michigan. It's the Michigan 400. The schedule calls for qualifying today and the race tomorrow. Here's an update for us from John Swickla.
Following 2 rain delays, qualifying for tomorrow's Michigan 400 NASCAR race is now underway. Rookie Ron Bouchard from Massachusetts, who won his first NASCAR race just 2 weeks ago at Talladega, has the best speed so far, 161.501 miles per hour. But some of the top drivers, including Bobby Allison and Darrell Waltrip, have yet to qualify.
And there goes John off in the sunset of Michigan. In baseball, the games in progress look like this after 3 complete at Wrigley in Chicago. The Cubbies top Pittsburgh by a score of 1-0. Bibby going for Pittsburgh at 4-3. Krukow for the Cubs. He's 3-6. A rain delay at Montreal. St. Louis at Montreal when they play Force will face Gullickson. This evening, San Francisco at Cincinnati, Philadelphia at New York, Houston at San Diego, and Atlanta in Los Angeles. One game in progress in the junior circuit after 2. It is now 2-1. The Indians top Kansas City. The game is in Cleveland. Mike Hargrove had his first home run of the year for Cleveland. It came in the first. A man was on base. Also this afternoon coming up, Milwaukee at Toronto and California at Oakland. Tonight, Chicago at Baltimore, New York at Detroit, Boston at Texas, Seattle at Minnesota. In baseball last night, the Red Hot Cardinals beat the Expos 3-1. The win gives the Cards a mark of 4 wins, just 1 loss in the second half of the campaign. The third round of the Sammy Davis Greater Hartford Open is in progress. The man on top is now Fred Couples. Not the biggest name in golf, obviously, but nonetheless the man to catch right now. Couples is 14 strokes under par, while Midway leader Lon Nielsen is 2 back through 8 holes. It's raining in Montreal as well as Detroit right now, and the semifinals in the men's tennis Canadian Tennis Open have been delayed. 2 matches are set for today, but if the rain continues, the semifinals will take place tomorrow and the finals on Monday. This is Jack Briggs on the Sports Line.
If you're in Des Moines for the State Fair, just passing through, there's a new restaurant you ought to know about. Montana's, just west of the state capital. Montana's has good food at very reasonable prices. You can get full meals or a selection of choice lean burgers all day long. Montana's feature the finest slow-cooked ribs, traditionally barbecued chicken and beef, plus a variety of smokehouse sandwiches, Old West chili, Mexican specialties, and special desserts. During the Iowa State Fair, Montana's will be open till midnight for food, the bar till 2 a.m. Montana's, where it doesn't take a whole lot of money to fill you up. Montana's, an alternative you'll enjoy. East 6th at Court at the foot of the state capitol. Listen to this commercial news flash. Several manufacturers and distributors have selected Huxley Furniture World to liquidate huge amounts of cancellations and overstocks. This is top quality furniture, and all manufacturers' guarantees will be in effect. Some of the biggest names in the furniture industry are desperate to sell. They've given orders to sell to the public regardless of cost or loss. No matter where you live, drive to Huxley Furniture World on Highway 69 in Huxley, Iowa. In 1981, buy your furniture there. Sale hours 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. every weekday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Saturday and Sunday.
The sound of sports, all sports, here at 1040 on the WHO Saturday Sports Line.
Our guest is Hank Stram, now a CBS sports commentator on the radio and TV sides of that corporation. The numbers to call here, 282-5111 locally, and the toll-free Watts line for the state of Iowa is 1-800-532-1111. Hank, we're just coming off a baseball strike. Baseball is in full swing once again, despite the injuries caused to it by the strike. Next year, there's a possibility of a football players' strike, and you, as a Kansas City Chiefs coach back in the early 70s, went through one of those, but I think the issues that we're talking about now are more complex, and the possibility of a mid-season strike is more likely this time than it was the last 2 times.
Well, Mike, I would like to think that the players and the people involved in advising players would certainly have learned something from the baseball strike. It's very obvious that nobody won and everybody lost as far as the baseball strike is concerned, and I would like to think that the players would have plenty of time to be able to iron out their problems and realize that they, will not gain anything by striking in 1981 or 1982. I just think it would be a bad mistake. There's a lot of talk about the fact that there will be a strike, but I would like to think that they'll be intelligent enough to be able to work it out before that would happen.
Hank, do you think now that football considers itself to be in a better light, now that the baseball situation has been so muddled and people are kind of upset with the baseball administration?
Well, I don't think there's ever been any kind of a deviation from the attitude people have had about football. I think that the overall posture of fans around the country has been very, very strong about professional football and football in general, so I don't think there's been any adverse attitude or feeling about the game, and the fact that the baseball players were on strike certainly would maybe enhance the position that the football players have already had But it's always been very, very positive, and I don't think this will make any difference.
Hank, on paper, in your opinion, what's the strongest division in the entire National Football League right now?
Well, it would have to be probably the Eastern Division of the American Conference. I think the competition in that conference is going to be very, very keen. New England is an outstanding team. Buffalo is coming on strong. The Jets, I think, could be a very good team this year. The Miami Dolphins are struggling a little bit. They have a little way to go before they recapture the winning personality that they enjoyed. And I think the Baltimore Colts could be an excellent football team. So I think that's one of the most competitive divisions. I think the Western Division, really the Western Division of the American Football Conference is another situation where you have Oakland and San Diego being very, very competitive. Kansas City is a stage where they surely should make some kind of a surge, some kind of a move, and everybody thinks they're going to be a better team in 1981. That could be provide a lot of competition. And, of course, the Central Division with Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Houston, and that division, as tough as that's been, that, too, could be a problem because I think Cincinnati could be one of the surprise teams in the league in 1981. Really, as you look at it, it's hard to say any one particular thing is conference is any more rugged than any other one, the way it looks right now.
Coach Stram, I'm sure a lot of people would like to know this. Are you thinking about possibly going back into the coaching profession at any future time?
Not especially. I'm not looking at going back into coaching just to get back into coaching. If it were the right kind of an opportunity and something that I felt was attractive, I would possibly consider it, but I wouldn't go back just to be going back.
Was your greatest thrill the Super Bowl victory? One would think so.
Yes, it was. No question about that. I think when you're in a competitive game like football and the one game to win is the Super Bowl, and you're fortunate enough to be involved in that game on two occasions and win it once, it would have to be the biggest thrill, I think, of anybody's career.
Why was that team so special? What gave them the qualities to take them all the way?
Well, number one, it has to, football is three things. Coaching is three things. It's accumulating talent, assessing talent, making the talent play. We also had a very strong family atmosphere on our football team at that particular stage of our history and growth, and we had some outstanding people. I think you win with great people. I think there's three kinds of motivation. Motivation by self, motivation by fear, motivation by incentive, and the more people that you have who are self-motivated, the better you're going to be, and the more leaders you have on your team, the better you're going to be. And that's what our team was like that particular year. We had a lot of outstanding leaders, and Jerry Mays, and E.J. Hollop, and Lenny Dawson, and Willie Lanier, and Jimmy Lynch, and Bobby Bell, and people like that who led in different ways, and they provided a great impetus to our football team, and along with the great ability that we had in some positions, why we were able to win big in that particular year that when we're talking about in 1969, we played 23 games and won 20 of those 23 games. And so it was quite an accomplishment, and we felt very, very proud about what we were able to accomplish in Kansas City.
Hank, after the Super Bowl victory in Minnesota against Minnesota back in 1970, Sports Illustrated, for its preview issue that year of pro football in 1970, had a picture of you, and in the background it had a picture of the formations you used as the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Minnesota Vikings and as they beat 20 or 19 other opponents that year too. I'm going to ask you, what do you think your contributions have been to innovating pro football's offenses during the 1970s?
Oh, I really don't think, Mike, that we contributed anything special, very honestly. I think everything that we did was done with one purpose, and that's to help us win. I think people have the mistaken impression sometimes that you innovate just to be innovative and try to get credit for doing something. From that standpoint, that was never the case. Everything that we did because of necessity. Like our triple stack, we just had three linemen we just didn't have four great linemen, but we had four great linebackers. So it was very easy to come up with that scheme because it helped us get done what we had to get done as a football team. The moving pocket was the same way. We used to play against San Diego in the early days when they had Ernie Ladd and Earl Faison, who were tremendous football players with great size, and invariably every time we played against them, they would knock down 4 or 5 passes, we'd never get the ball in the air. So we just went to the moving pocket, and the first time we did that, we completed the first 11 passes we threw and threw 4 touchdown passes of the 11. But here again, it was something we had to do to find a way to win, and that was the whole scheme of what we try to accomplish. We felt very strongly about the I formation, the shifting, the man in motion. We thought all those things created a moment of doubt, a moment of indecision, and this is why we did them. But as far as what contribution, I really don't know whether it contributed anything or not, very frankly.
Hank Stram on the line, WHO Saturday Sports Line, local number 282-5111, and the toll-free Watts line for the state of Iowa is 1-800-532-1111. I've been reading, Hank, that we can look for more shotgun formations this year in the National Football League. I believe you alluded to that just a bit earlier with us. And I recall that back in the early 60s, San Francisco used a shotgun formation, I believe, until they came up against the Chicago Bears one day in 1962. And something didn't work. Something went wrong that day in 1962. It was abandoned until Tom Landry picked it up with the Dallas Cowboys, and now we see other teams using it. So apparently, if you have a center who can get the ball back to you, and even high school teams have that, they use the shotgun. Do you think pro teams will be using more of the shotgun now?
Yes, I think they will. It's very obvious they're going to use it. I personally, we used it way back in 1960 and 61 and 62. In fact, we used it in the Super Bowl game on a couple of plays. But I feel strongly about the fact that if you're going to use a spread formation, then you ought to really use a spread and have the quarterback back there 11 or 12 yards like we used to with our football team. And back in the days of Dana Bible and Matty Bell and all those great coaches in the Southwest Conference, the spread formation really created a lot of problems because the quarterback was so deep. I don't think he creates nearly the problem that he would if he was back 11, 12 yards when he's back there 5 yards. Because I think the defensive people have the same lanes to pursue, and the quarterback is basically at the same depth when he throws the football. It's 7 or 8 yards deep. But this is what they're all going to, and I'm sure we're going to see an awful lot of it, and I'm sure it's going to be very effective because it takes a quarterback. We always felt that, it was very obvious that it took a quarterback 1.5 and 1/7 seconds to get back into the pocket, whereas if he was back there in obvious passing situations, it only takes about 6 or 7 tenths of a second to get the ball back. So you're way ahead from a time standpoint, and it provides the quarterback with an opportunity to get a better view of what's happening from a defensive viewpoint. So I think it's a very obvious thing that had to come because it makes a lot of sense and it would put a lot more pressure on defenses.
Hank, now you see the big running back, the Earl Campbell, the George Rogers, the Otis Anderson, Billy Sims for that matter is quite big. Back in your day, well, I don't want to make it sound like it was that distant, but when the Chiefs were winning back in the late 60s, early 70s, they had fellows like Mike Garrett, Robert Holmes, the small guy, about 5'9", 5'8". Those guys ran very well for you. Do you think it makes that much difference, size now, for running back?
I think with the addition of 2 more games, league games, I think durability is very, very important, and it's very obvious that the bigger people who are bigger and stronger, who weigh 225 and 230 and 235, are going to be able to endure better than the little fellas. And so basically that's what everybody would like to have. At that particular time, we just didn't have an opportunity to get big people. So with our scheme of things, the little backs that we had, like Warren McVay and Mike Garrett and Bobby Holmes, all of those people did a super job for us because we were able to hide them behind our offensive line, and that's why we shifted, and that's why we moved people so much, because we didn't want people to know where our little backs were coming from. Basically, all they saw was the top of the helmets most of the time, and it was very effective for us.
Hank, I've got a trivia question. Don't know if you keep up on your old players or not, but I remember a very exciting punt returner by the name of Nolan Flea Smith. Whatever happened to Nolan Flea Smith?
The Super Nat still is in Jackson, Mississippi, and he's coaching, getting along nicely, and doing a very good job.
Final question. I'm going to put you on the spot here. We'll see if we can Do you have any favorites for the divisions, and then looking on the playoffs and the Super Bowl?
No, I don't think I think it's really kind of impossible to go that far with it. I have some feelings about the playoff people. I think, for example, in the American Football Conference, I would pick Oakland to win in the West. I would pick Pittsburgh to win in the Central, and I would pick New England to win in the East. In the National Football Conference, I would pick Dallas to win in the East. I would pick the Rams to win in the West, and I would pick who am I missing?
Central Division.
The Central Division, I would pick Detroit to win in the Central Division of the National Football Conference.
Well, actually, you and I don't vary that much, so we'll just have to see what happens. Okay. Hank Stram, we know you have to go this afternoon, and we thank you very much for joining us at this point, and best of luck to you throughout the rest of the season.
Appreciate it very much, and nice of you to call.
Thanks a lot. Hank Stram, NFL commentator for CBS Sports, as well as a former head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs and the New Orleans Saints. Coming up, open sports talk after we get into some Iowa sports and the AccuWeather. It's 2:30.